Welcome to the Cyber Sangha podcast. Cyber Sangha is a program of free live broadcasts, launched in 2009 by renowned teacher and author Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche. Join us as we draw on ancient Tibetan wisdom to discover how to connect with our best self and live to our highest potential. The following conversation, turning to the present moment, how mindfulness can loosen an inflexible mindset, happened on August 30th, 2022, as a science and spirituality dialogue with Wendy, Hasenkamp, Adam Hanley, Tibetan teacher Geshe YongDong, and host Alejandro Chaoul-Reich. This was part of a year-long series, Bring Body, Speech, and Mind to Life. This content is for informational purposes only. Listeners should consult medical professionals for any physical or mental health concerns. Please use headphones and do not meditate while driving or operating machinery.
Welcome everyone to another dialogue of science and spirituality in Cyber Sangha. My name is Alejandro Chaoul and I'm delighted to host this dialogue on turning to the present moment. In a moment, I'll introduce our speakers that are joining us today. I want to thank Rinpoche today, but as the creator of Cyber Sangha, who thought of Cyber Sangha even before COVID. And so, this way of interconnecting. And as we were talking with our speakers, we're all in all different time zones, and yet we're here together in this moment. And I'm sure you, from Facebook Live, you're all over also, not just different places in the US or North America, but all over the world. And this is a fantastic aspect that we can thank these platforms to really having this Cyber Sangha. And in Cyber Sangha, for those who are new joining us today, I want to remind you that one of the things that we do is every full moon, we get together for 24 hours. So, and we pass the baton. So we start in one place in the US, and then we send it to Finland, and then we go to Spain, and so we do it in all around the world and in different languages. So join us, it's free, and you can drop in and out at any time. Now, part of these dialogues is to really bring not only minds together, but hearts together and people together. And today we have a wonderful group of people to discuss this, how mindfulness can loosen an inflexible mindset. And we were discussing this morning how Rinpoche gave us this teaching this morning. I'm in Italy and don't have enough Wi-Fi connection, so Geshe YongDong can join, and graciously Geshe YongDong, who's in Vancouver, Canada, could join. So let me start by introducing Geshe YongDong. So Geshe YongDong Losar is both a scholar and a monk in the ancient Bön tradition of Tibet. He actually trained in Nangshik, in Tibetan monastery in Tibet, and then came to the North America, and particularly he established himself in Vancouver Island, an incredible place off the coast of BC, and he founded Sherab Chamaling there, and he teaches all over the world. I've been very blessed to have received teachings from him, know him quite well, and lately he just published his book Calm Breath, Calm Mind with Wisdom Publication, and if you haven't seen it, it's a great book. And also Geshe-la will join us in our retreat, in the fall retreat at Serenity Ridge, that will be both in person and online, and more about that later. So joining with Geshe-la today, we have Wendy Hasenkamp, and Wendy is she serves as the science director of Mind and Life Institute. She's based in Charlottesville, Virginia, and as a neuroscientist and contemplative practitioner, she's interested in understanding this subjective experience and how it's represented in the brain, but also how the mind and brain can transform through experience and practice, enhancing flourishing. So a lot of times we talk about this word resilience, but beyond resilience, there's flourishing, and we may talk about that too. She has done lots of research examining the neural correlates of meditation and with a focus on the shifts between mind wandering and attention. She also has a podcast, a fabulous podcast of Mind and Life, where she brings great people to interview. And if you haven't tapped into that, please go listen. She has, and they're also recorded, and you can listen those in her archive. So welcome, Wendy. And our third presenter today will be Adam Hanley. And Adam is actually now in Utah, in Salt Lake City. So as you can see, we're different parts of North America. And he's a licensed psychologist and assistant professor at the Center of Mindfulness and Integrative Health Intervention Development, C-Mind, at the University of Utah's College of Social Work. The goal of his research program is to develop and refine both brief and intensive mindfulness-based interventions that can be embedded in medical settings to treat pain and addiction, as well as improve quality of life. So together today, we'll tackle this aspect of mind. As you know, we do every month, we go body, then breath, then mind. So this time is mind, and particularly these turning to the present moment, how mindfulness can loosen an inflexible mindset. So hopefully we've been loosened up a little bit. And with that, I want to turn first to Wendy and see, how is this present moment for you now?
Thanks so much, Alejandro. It's great to be with you all, and thanks for the invitation. I love this idea of starting with the present moment, very grounding and centering. I am feeling quite good. I think pretty energized, looking forward to this conversation. I think that I appreciate you also starting with that mantra. I felt like that was really very calming to listen to. So I'm really grateful to be here. Grateful for so many things I've been reflecting on, just health and all that. So excited to be with you all and looking forward to this dialogue.
Thank you, Wendy. And yes, that mantra is not only Rinpoche singing, but also Danny Ramos in Torreon arranging it. So thank you both for that. So Geshe, how's the present moment for you? And plan, you were kind of thrown into this at the last moment. So how are you? How is this present moment for you? And you might want to unmute.
Okay, hello everyone. Hello, Ale, everyone. Thank you for your introduction. This moment is, every moment is very precious, and I would say very gratitude have this opportunity again to be with you guys. And also I feel like for myself, on the cushion where I'm sitting, I always love to be cross-legged, even though eating food, talking, teaching, of course, easier, but so basically, as soon as the cross-legged sitting, stillness. I feel peace and presence. Immediately, most time I feel like that. So that's what I feel right now. It's more stillness and the gratitude be with you to share or listening.
Thank you, Geshe. Adam, same for you. In Salt Lake City, how are you feeling in the present moment?
Yeah, I think maybe I need to cross my legs and get a little of that stillness because I'm excited to be here. This is just from your introduction. It sounds like you're doing a lot of exciting things that I wasn't aware of until very recently. So really interested to see kind of how this dialogue unfolds today. And then I guess looking beyond this present moment into the future, sort of seeing how I might learn more from what you guys have been doing and will be doing in the future. So excited to see how I can contribute a little bit today, but I guess more excited to kind of learn and listen as well.
Thank you, Adam. And for me too, I mean, I'm so blessed in this present moment. I have to say that when Rinpoche couldn't make it, and we were juggling, and then luckily Geshe dropped in. Now I can also feel like sitting and in this present moment, open to what will unfold. So with that, what I like to do is go from this present moment to kind of double click, if you would, and know a little bit about you. So the audience can know about you, and and since we always usually start with Rinpoche, let me start with Geshe. Geshe, if we could, tell us a little about you. Usually with Rinpoche, he's always here, so people don't need to know too much about him. He thinks because they know him, but we want to know about you. You're new to this setting, and we welcome you. So if you want to say a few words about you and your interest in these topics.
Thank you. About me or me. I've been in Canada for 20 years, and before that I was in India 7 years, and then before that I was in Tibet for 24 years. So divided 3 different places, basically, mainly for where I have been. So I became a Geshe degree 1992. So almost 11 and a half years to study and became Geshe in the Nanji Monastery. And then through Himalaya, I was in India and met very high masters, including His Holiness Dalai Lama, His Holiness Menu Tenzin, Venerable Namdal Rinpoche, receiving teachings from them. And then after that, then come to the West. Now I've been teaching, practicing, but teaching. And so teaching is part of me to practice, basically. I learned so much through teaching, through sharing. Even my masters in Tibet, I share, or monk friends, saying, I learned more through teaching them, even when I study. So that's, I think, something, even right now, when we are sharing like this, how to be present myself, how to taming my ego or self focus, and be more kindness. I don't know, be more stillness, more balance. So all the things that needed to during the teaching and sharing is really learning so much through that. So anyway, that's I would say that's basically what I can share.
Thank you, Geshe. So Wendy, now you're the science director of Mind and Life, and you see a lot of research, but you were a researcher also. What led you, if you want to say a little bit, what led you into that life of researcher, and what led you into where you are now?
Yeah, thanks, Ale. I think I was always interested, as a young child in biology and life and these mysteries. And then I think as a teenager, I came upon, or I first learned about, the brain and neurons, and somehow that these electrical and chemical signals are related to our, subjective experience, our thoughts and emotions. And that just kind of blew my mind. It still does. I think it's so fascinating. So that led me to study in graduate school. I studied neuroscience. I studied biology and psychology in undergrad. And at the time in neuroscience in my graduate degree and a little while thereafter, I was really in the realm of psychiatry and studying psychiatric disorders. I think in part that's one of the few paths that was available at that time based on funding and labs and all of these things. So I studied psychiatric disorders and schizophrenia in particular for about 10 years. And I had a very molecular, kind of very reductionist micro interest. And in doing that, I started eventually in my postdoc working with some schizophrenia patients, and became, increasingly disillusioned with the lack of the work that I was doing, the ability to actually translate or help whole people. So I was kind of going through this period of, questioning this path, and around that same time is when I was introduced to meditation, just on a personal level. And I had, started practicing, and really quite quickly, within the span of a couple of weeks or months, I noticed some changes, in my own subjective experience, more calmness, more awareness, particularly less irritability. I would find myself in situations that would normally really bother me, and they just weren't bothering me that much. And so I was fascinated, as a neuroscientist, what is going on in my brain? And this was very early in the days of the field, this being a field of study. So, but I became really interested in this, and slowly over many years, through many conversations, began to shift my research direction towards studying meditation. And through that, actually got introduced to the Mind and Life Institute, and received some funding from them to do some of my initial studies. And eventually, kind of hit a roadblock of funding and position availability on this path in academia, which I kind of had already been questioning anyway. So I made the jump. I was very fortunate that at the time there was a position available at Mind and Life that really fit, with a lot of things I had enjoyed doing. So I jumped into that nonprofit space, and I've been there for 10 years, a little more. And it's been so wonderful. I've held a lot of different roles in that time, but really just being in this field of conversation between so many disciplines. And I feel like so enjoyed having my horizons expanded, being exposed to philosophy and Buddhism and social science and clinical science, all of these different realms that come together in this kind of larger field that we call contemplative science. So that's just been a joy. And, it's a lot of what we're doing here today. So this is my fun, happy place.
Thank you, Wendy. Yeah, and we'll talk more about that relationship between practice and research. But I think many of us have that both parts, and one influences the other. And thank you for introducing me to Adam. So Adam, it's great to have you here. And I'm very curious about your path and what led you where you are, and this really interesting work that you're doing with mindfulness-based interventions in medical settings, particularly with pain and addiction. But what led you to that path?
Yeah, so it was kind of a non-linear path, because Wendy has already alluded to, they often are. So I grew up in Tennessee, sort of the geographic center of the state, where, pretty solidly stationed in the Bible Belt. My grandpa was a preacher, kind of grew up in the church in kind of that world. But I guess I'm kind of oppositional by nature. And so, it's rather argumentative with my youth leaders and stuff. So my mom started kind of giving me other things to read. So the Tao Te Ching, the Bhagavad Gita, things like this. And I think that kind of got me curious about just sort of other ways of being, maybe other modes of consciousness. And then I went off and just played sports for a while. So I ended up playing soccer in college, and then basketball in Finland, which I think was the first country you mentioned earlier. It was kind of serendipitous. But in Finland, I got hurt, sort of abruptly ended my playing days. And that was kind of rough physically and emotionally. And I think that's really when my practice kind of started to develop a little more, to deal with some of that physical pain, and then kind of some of the anxiety and confusion trying to figure out what's coming next. And so from there, I went to Korea for a couple of years because I still wasn't sure what was coming next, taught English, but then eventually went back to graduate school, and went to a counseling psych, school psych combined program. where I ended up meeting my colleague I worked right down the hall with, Eric Garland, who is doing a lot of research on mindfulness, pain, and addiction. So we started kind of working together and have been working together ever since. That's kind of, I guess, the narrative there.
Awesome. Thank you. And say hi to Eric for me.
Yeah, we'll do it.
And Geshe, I would like to know, I know that you've been interested in this connection of science and spirituality, of kind of how to investigate in a way the mind, maybe somehow through what science tells us, and particularly in the brain, but also maybe other ways of personal investigation of mind, maybe here, but this investigation and your interest in both, one can learn from the other. If you could share some of your interest in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting when you said mind here or like I mean, for the Bon teachings over 18,000 years, this many, including Tomba Shenrab, who is the founder of Bon, he discovered through the practice training on the YongDong Gutsak mountain in the Himalaya for 9 years, meditate or retreats, and then he became enlightened with his consciousness or his mind. Also, we believe it's body, but first it became enlightenment is his mind. So since then, many masters learned his teachings that follows up until today. So the ancient wisdom already really exists to learning, and then now is the science, and now science talking about again or discovering the mind. And I don't know how. I'm not very familiar about science, how they discover the mind. But mind is invisible, but the physical body is visible. So through body, you may see the body, the mind, through the body. So what our tradition, what I learned, is proves the people who meditate, people who do spiritual practice, and the more physically, they're more peace, more kindness, more healthy, less stressed. So that's what I see through the mind, the body, and movement or health. It particularly at the end of the life, when someone is dying, then we do Tugdam, Tibetan called it Tugdam, that you meditate and die, your consciousness like a peaceful like this. So that is, I don't know how to discover the science that physically that's what's happening like that. And I notice myself when I'm practicing, again, my mind, when Ali asking me where the mind, there's a two kind of mind. We go the sim and the ripa. The sim is the mind in the head, often thinking mind, and ripa is without thinking mind, or I call the realization mind, or primordial mind awareness, which is in the heart. So that's I try to practicing. If the present moment, learning present moment, is when I focus with that state of mind, either doesn't matter either talking or not talking, or sitting or not, meditating or not. When you're connecting to the mind in the heart, the ripa, we call the ripa, really differences. Just being myself or like that. So that I think would be so nice, maybe through science, to discovering what is the mind repart. That's when you're meditating.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yes,
Yeah.
we hope to come back to that, and has to do with maybe this flexibility, because a lot of times in science, it seems that the base of where the mind is, it's always felt here, right? And I guess there's also, I mean, there's a whole area of implicit bias, but there's even an implicit bias of thinking that the mind is here, right? So, Wendy, do you want to bring us into a little bit of that framework of implicit bias that we may have, and maybe with ourselves, but maybe even taking it further in how that impacts in our connections, both interpersonal, but also at the larger societal level?
Sure, yeah. And I don't know if it would be helpful for me to introduce first these kind of predictive ideas of the mind.
Sure.
So I'll do a little bit of that first, and then
Yeah.
maybe we can explore all these other. So yeah, when Ale reached out to me for this, we were just chatting about what would be interesting to talk about. And I was sharing that something I've been really fascinated by in the last few years is newer theories of how brains and minds work. That really shift, at least from the way I was trained as a neuroscientist. So when I went to school, the brain was really conceived of as more of a stimulus response mechanism. So like you receive all this information from the world through all your senses, you do some computation or something, and then you make a response in the world. And that was kind of how the brain was viewed at that time. And these newer theories are really shifting to think about the brain and the mind more in a role of prediction and construction. And so this I find really fascinating, and actually interesting alignments too with Buddhist theory. So in general, the idea there is that, yes, the mind is, receiving information and responding, but at the same time, a lot of what it's busy doing in the background is constructing this model of the world, which is based on all of our past experiences, right? And so, over time, from when we're born to the present moment, we're kind of forming associations. We're determining kind of regularities, like, oh, when I do this, this happens, or when this person shows up, this is likely to happen. And so we start to build this very complex model of what's going on out there. And then we use that to help us, navigate the world and survive and be effective and efficient and all of that. And so it's fantastic that we have these models and these abilities to model. Of course, there are ways that the model can go wrong or cause us harm or cause others harm, right? Because it's not necessarily that the model is correct. It's just that it's been our experience, right? And so there's lots of interesting ways that then we form these habits or associations that are problematic. And so that opens up a lot of space. And so I think a really interesting question for me and, for this field is like a moment of when you have this prediction or expectation and something happens that doesn't match, right? So you have this mismatch between what's happening in the present moment from your senses versus what you expected to happen. And so what do you do about that? And basically the idea is that there's two things you can do to resolve that discrepancy. You can either take in that information from your senses and from the present moment and kind of integrate that into your model, or you can find a way to kind of push that away, reevaluate or reframe that idea, or just change your situation altogether such that that competing information is no longer there, thereby just kind of confirming the model that you have and just kind of going with what we know already. And so it might not be surprising to hear that, it's more likely for us to just stick with what we know, confirm the model, just keep that running. It certainly takes a lot less energy to do that. And, so that keeps us in these habits. And, in many ways, our models are effective, but like we were saying, there are ways that they're not. So what I've been fascinated by is ideas about how meditation and contemplative practice might allow us to be more open to the present moment and to sensory information coming in that we could then use to kind of update our model or shift these kind of mental patterns and habits and things that are going on. So, and that's why I immediately thought of Adam when we were chatting about this, because he's done some really great work that I think shows that very beautifully. So I don't know if we want to go to that first, or we can talk about this, has relevance for implicit bias too, and all that.
Let's do that. Thank you, Wendy. So Adam, if you want to go into that direction, and then we come back to implicit bias and to other things. Yes.
Yeah. So I guess even before talking about this study, I should say thank you to Mind and Life, because they provided the funding to do this project. So thank you to Wendy and all your good folks there. So for a while, there's been this idea of mindfulness having the capacity to de-automatize behavior. All right. So Wendy's talking about these prediction machines that are just maybe kind of just run through. Let's just follow the prediction machine. But maybe if we can take a step back into that present moment, sort of see the wider field of experience and decide, okay, what do I want to do with this error or inconsistency between my prediction and the information coming in? So we wanted to see if we could test whether mindfulness impacted the automaticity of learning. And so we were curious if we could disrupt a Pavlovian, like a classical learning conditioning paradigm with mindfulness training. So what we did was bring about 50 students in to the lab, and we had them meditate with us, guided meditation practices, 15 or so minutes over the course of 5 weeks. And at the end of that 5th meditation practice, we hooked them up to an eye blink conditioning apparatus where they wore this little hat, had a little nozzle coming out that would deliver a light puff to the eye, and a light puff to the eye makes us blink. And so we also had them wear headphones. And for some of the trials, the conditioning trials, we would play a tone just slightly before they would feel that puff of air. So over time, the folks would learn that the sound meant puff. So sound then translates into blink. And what we found was that the folks that went through that 5 weeks of mindfulness training were less likely to pick up that conditioned learning blink. It took about 10 more conditioning trials before they blinked in response to the sound without the puff. They were also about half as likely to demonstrate that conditioned blink over the whole course of the task. So it looks like that they were slower to develop that conditioned learning, and they were less likely to demonstrate that conditioned learning. And what we found was that the folks that reported the highest levels of mindfulness during that 5th session relative to their 1st session were the ones that blinked the less. This sort of mediated that relationship between experimental condition and conditioned blinking. We also had heart rate variability that we were mapping during that blink and during the meditation practice. And what we found was that mindfulness kind of increased parasympathetic activity. Physiologically, folks felt more calm in their bodies during the meditation practice. But this didn't predict how conditioned they became to the sounds. It was more the cognitive control of the mindfulness practice that predicted how conditioned they would become to that task, which I think is a really interesting distinction there, right? So it's kind of a top-down sort of regulation process as opposed to kind of a bottom-up, which maybe gives us a little more control, a little more hope for the kind of ability to regulate ourselves with intentional practices such as mindfulness, and maybe give us better control over kind of what we're doing, what we're seeing, what we're predicting in the world moving forward.
Was there any was there any instruction on blink or not blink, or try to hold a blink? Was that any part of it?
No, I mean, it was folks were told, all right, you're going to feel a little puff in the air, you're going to hear tones. They weren't told really anything other than that, and they were generally pretty startled by that puff to begin with. So it was this really interesting kind of just open exploration, I guess, of the puff and the tone kind of all at once. So yeah, no real instruction there.
Wonderful, wonderful. I was going back into, Geshe, the experiences that you mentioned with meditation being calmness, but there's also another experience that we talk about that is flexibility, right? Being able to be flexible. Sometimes we even talk about that related to the air element, right? This sense of flexibility and that as we sit, as you were saying at the beginning, that it's not this sense of sitting, so there's a sense of flexibility in the body, but also allows that flexibility in the mind, that when, we're said, well, this is the plan that we're doing, and something changes, that we're not as startled, to use Adam's word, and that we have the ability to shift. Is that some of your experience with meditation, Geshe? This flexibility aspect.
Yes, flexibility or flexible of your mind is really through mindfulness or through meditation or through spiritual practice, and that is really like my master who is still alive in Tibet. He was really strict to me when I was studying under him. And who I am today is, I would say, two people of course, many people helped me, but him and then my mother, who I don't really remember that much when she passed away. But sometimes it doesn't matter. Small things affect your entire life. So this master, he was very strict to teaching me. Some days he can push me, wonderful, my feeling is so good, you are just the top of the world. Sometimes you are the bottom of the world. You're terrible. Your study is like that. So the way he training like that, it's who I am became really good. So then now I'm like, then after, I don't know, many years, 2015, I went back to Tibet and spent time with him. And he almost like tested me all the, what I'm doing, I just be whatever feeling I used to be like I tried to test, or I tried to good answering like that. And but that case, no, I don't have to. Whatever who I am, whatever I'm learning, whatever teaching, that's what I'm sharing with him. And so I realizing here how flexible his mind is, even though rough outside, but he is just, I don't know, anything you're sharing, he knows everything, accepting, or no judgment, his mind, I would say, truly no judgment. And so that to me is really, for myself, I'm learning. And even last night, Rinpoche asked me, the moment I'm going to bed, and then this morning, then Rinpoche asked me, can you do for him to do today? I said, yeah, sure. I have the time set up, like managing little changes a little bit, but it meant he meant to, I meant to be here. And so that's to me like a flexible kind of mind. Like,
yeah.
I used to be like not like, no kind, but the Dzogchen practicing, I call the yes. And sutra teaching is no. Everything is no. Don't eat this. Don't do this. Don't do this. No. And now Dzogchen teaching yes. Because how the mind flexible. So expression, I call the expression of the sutra is no, and expression of Dzogchen is yes, flexible, open mind. And Tantra is no but yes but no. So that's I call the three teachings of a whole one Buddhist teachings.
Wonderful. I love that.
Yeah.
Yes. So with that, Wendy, maybe it is we wanted to talk about meditation and where we left with implicit bias and this aspect of flexibility. Take it wherever you want.
Yeah, thanks. This is great. And yeah, Geshe, I really appreciate those insights too from the different kinds of practices and styles. I bet Adam will have a lot to say about this kind of more non-dual maybe approaches. But yeah, I think with implicit bias is just one example that I find really quite poignant about meditation's possibility and capacity to allow us to shift our patterning, our associations, our model that we're holding. And I think one of the reasons I love Adam's study that he described is it would be considered in neuroscience like a very basic mechanism, almost below the level of awareness. Like Ale, you asked if the participants were instructed at all about blinking, but there's almost nothing you can do about it. It's a very basic like reflex kind of response. Which is really, I think, shows like the level at which this can be happening. But if you kind of zoom out to societal interpersonal levels, it's happening there too. So I think that work around implicit bias, so implicit bias, of course, being kind of the associations and biases that we form about usually it's talked about with particular groups of people, just based on all of our experiences and culture and media and society and all the things that we internalize, which can lead to, of course, stereotypes and these implicit beliefs about groups of people based on all sorts of any kind of like identity characteristic. And so this has been studied, I think even early on, I was with some folks back at Emory, we were thinking like, well, this would be a really interesting thing to study because it feels like something that could shift if you're becoming more open and moving beyond these automatized patterns, because that's another example of like an automatic response is when you have these biases, and that's why they're called implicit, like you don't even know that you're having them. It's just kind of wired in based on the way we've all lived. And so there've just been a number of studies, since about 2014 or 15 that have looked at different kinds of meditation practices. And they've really been quite consistent in finding that, it's either loving kindness practice or even just a mindfulness practice or some kind of combination in different settings will reduce implicit bias as measured, in a number of ways. I think there's even now enough that there's been a meta-analysis and a systematic review of these studies, and the findings have been pretty consistent. It's not a drastic change, but there is a pretty, like, again and again, we're seeing that it's nudging, it's reducing the bias. It's kind of maybe allowing things to be more equitable or equanimous in our minds. Which is amazing. I think in the field of implicit bias, it was thought for a long time that these things wouldn't change, you couldn't change them. And so nobody was trying to change them. And so there have been another number of interesting approaches now to see how this might be shiftable. And of course, these have tons of implications for the way our society is set up and structured, and with, equitable systems or not, and things like that. So I'll leave that there. I don't know if others want to reflect on more kind of interpersonal or societal aspects of this.
Well, I think it's really, and we're living in a world that this implicit bias has been explicit bias, and it's becoming very difficult and polarizing. And so I think that even naming it, actually, sometimes I think, and I like to hear Adam's view, because I think that by being explicit, sometimes it feels we could do more, but sometimes, well, it's almost that pathway is solidified, So have you done some research in this area, Adam, and anything that you want to share with that?
Yeah, sort of. So I think, I'm really curious, kind of about. It's heartbreaking, right, to watch these implicit biases play out at this social level. But for me, that feels so big that I think what I've tried to do is take that back to the individual level and see if I can help one person, help myself, kind of shift that bias just a small degree. And the way I've been doing that most recently, partly because we have to get funding to keep jobs and stuff, but is to examine kind of maybe the biases we hold about ourselves in the context of pain and addiction. Because I think what I see in working with folks living with chronic pain is that if we say the phrase, I am in pain enough, then that preposition in gets dropped out and the identity becomes I am pain. And so there's a kind of bias or a self-perception that evolves over time there with that prediction system getting repeated feedback. There's a sensation, I'm in pain, I am pain. And I think what we've been trying to do is really use mindfulness practices to kind of soften that self-bias, to soften the self-perception. And if we can have somebody step back from that repeatedly, then maybe kind of the scope of who they are becomes a little more open and a little more like full of possibility. And we've seen that we can do that pretty effectively. I've done a lot of work with knee and hip replacement patients right before they're going to have surgery. And so we go in and do some mindfulness training, some kind of, basic breathing practices, but also some more kind of space of the sky, sort of like broad, maybe non-dualish kind of practice. And what we found is that in two pretty large samples now, if we can get folks into that space where there's that less of that self involved in that mindfulness practice, then they report better post-operative outcomes, like a month after surgery, 6 weeks after surgery. And I think in some ways, these results are kind of analogous to what we're seeing in the psychedelic research field, right? Where we can turn that default mode down, we can turn down that sense of self. And there's less of that history, less of that old prediction machine getting dragged into the future. And so each moment becomes maybe a little more open to possibilities, healing, health, rest, whatever that is. And I think I kind of took us a little away from the larger societal focus of implicit bias, but I think maybe we shift that by shifting an individual's kind of bias and hopefully expanding and widening circles.
Yeah.
It,
Thank you. Yes, go ahead, Wendy.
Can I just follow up on one thing
Of course.
Adam, I love that you brought that to the self. I think that actually it could be one of the mechanisms that's serving to reduce implicit bias. I think that practice, does start to break down our reified sense of self, like our narrow sense of self, right? And so we can start to expand, and many practices, of course, think about explicitly about the similarities between, other people and ourselves, and that they also want happiness. And so all of these ways I think are really fascinating of starting to break down that like hard line between self and other. And then I think that also may be playing into, shifts that can happen societally and interpersonally too.
Yeah. And I think, as you said, Adam, too, this I am pain, right? Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche, through his work with the three doors, he talks actually of these identities that, as Wendy, you're saying, kind of reify, right? He calls them the pain body, the pain speech, the pain mind. So our pain identity has these aspects where they almost reify so much that, yes, I am pain. And I'm pain in the body. And how do I feel that? I'm pain in the speech, and I say these awful things, and I'm pain in the mind, and I think, but the moment of even just noticing, we have the possibility of bringing them not only to our awareness, but to practice. And eventually, as we, here we're cyber sangha, sangha, as we practice, together we can bring collectively, because we also carry these collective pains, right? This collective body pain, this collective, speech pain, and it doesn't mean the whole, but we have these communities, right? That we share the same collective speech pain, and this community sharing this other collective, and so how can we kind of be more open, and as Geshe was saying, kind of calm down and open, right? Like I like his book, Calm Breath, Calm Mind, right? And as we calm, there's this sense of openness, right? So I want to get into another topic in a moment, but I wanted to make sure I give space to Geshe. Anything you want to bring in this moment?
Yeah, so that's part of when Adam and Wendy talking about for the pain. So how body, for example, physical pain, body pain, I always, like you say exactly, I always practicing to recognizing this physical body as one part of who we are. Any part of your body pain, what we do is the moment there's a pain, immediately we're resisting that. How can I release that? Fixing that immediately. Instead, take a moment and take a deep breath and to actually really to experiencing what really pain is instead of ignored or reject or resisting. So that's a very important number one, to experiencing that, embracing whatever pain is, and then through breathing, gently, loving kindly to releasing. There's a way to using also visualization with the breathing, but the whole idea is important. Don't reject or resist right away. Acknowledge, accepting or embracing that just mindfully. I call it two steps. First, acknowledge. Just be there, whatever pain is. Then second, be mindful. To be mindfully wherever you are pain, and then to embracing that and or releasing that through kind of through breathing. Makes a big difference. And number one, I always thinking the body is such a secret, such a beautiful. And so recognizing a gratitude body, I'm so grateful to you have this body to have either whatever body is you get, either looking good or not looking good, either pain or not pain, it doesn't really matter. The matter is you have this body. It's really embrace and love. Because this body, you're learning, you're listening, you're tasting, you're touching, you went to different places, you meet many people, you taste so many food in your life, in our life. So until we die, this body is the one who carries us or experiences so many things. So gratitude, no judgment, loving. And then whatever there's a pain or struggle, is just love or be there, or embracing that, no judging, no rejecting. Because when we do that, body has intelligence. I believe that body knows how to heal itself. If we recognizing and let respect and respect, acknowledge, and trust, then body can heal itself. Really, body can. Instead of try to fix immediately with the mind, ego. I don't know. That I want to just share with you. That's my personal belief.
Thank you, Geshe. This field of contemplative research is really interesting because I think a lot of us get here because we have certain practices. We get into, whether it's mindfulness, yoga, Tibetan yoga, or Tai Chi, whatever it is. And then if we are in the field of research, we say, hey, this made me, like what Wendy was saying earlier, this made me feel different. Maybe can we actually look at this with a scientific eye? So, Wendy, I wanted to ask you on that. Were there practices that influence your research, or the other way around, in that relationship?
Yeah, I think this is a fascinating dynamic for any of us in the field who are both practitioners and researchers. So back when I was doing research, I was looking at shifts between mind-wandering states and focused attention states, and it really did emerge from the practice that I was primarily doing at that time, which it was kind of early in my meditation career, and was doing a lot of just breath focus practice, shamatha kind of style practice. And so, of course, as everyone notices, your mind goes off, and then you catch it, and then you kind of come back to the breath for a while, and it goes off again. And so I was, experiencing that. And then, this being still very early days in the research world, all the studies that had been done at that time, particularly looking at brain activity, had been putting, people in the scanner and asking them to meditate for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, something, and then just kind of averaging over that whole time, and saying that was what, the brain looked like with meditation. And, for me, I was like, well, there's a lot going on in 5 minutes, that's not consistent brain states. So that really drove me then to develop a paradigm through which you could get actually feedback from the person of like, oh, I realized my mind was wandering, and I just had to press a button whenever they realized that. And then I could start to split out, over time. Mind wandering was happening before, and then let's assume like focus was happening after. And so there was still a lot of, assumptions being made in that paradigm, but it was, I think, a shift to try to think about really the complex dynamic states that are happening over the course of any period of meditation, as opposed to just meditation being one thing.
Yeah. And I was thinking when you're saying that, when we do that, because I think we all, or many of us are in that, how much our implicit bias takes place, right? Like, okay, I have this experience, and so I'm sure that all the other subjects will have a similar experience, right? Because that's what happens with meditation, right? Do you notice that happening as well?
Yeah, you mean assuming that it's like that for everybody? Yeah, so that was a big part of designing that study, is I had to ask a whole bunch of people, like, is this what it's like for you? Because this is what it's like for me. And actually, I was very, pleased to find that at least that phenomena seems to be an extremely consistent phenomena. So I felt more confident being able to use that across people. But that's a great point that, there's research is very difficult to extrapolate across people, especially when you're dealing with these subtle, mental experiences.
Yeah. Adam, what about you? Did you bring is your practice informing any part of the research?
Yeah. So the very first study of mindfulness I did was not just breathing, body scan, just kind of still practice. It was actually a study of dishwashing as a meditation practice. And that was informed by me, again, being in the Bible Belt and people having all kinds of different reactions and feelings about mindfulness and meditation. I was like, well, most people wash some dishes. So if I could teach them how to wash dishes mindfully, then maybe we're getting some traction here. More recently, we've been doing a lot of work with orthopedics, and sports and playing has been a big part of my life. So I've been trying to teach PTs how to introduce mindfulness into the warm-ups of folks like coming back after surgery. So how can we kind of have mindfulness instruction on the treadmill or on the rowing machine, or kind of make this part of the routine so we're really treating mind and body at the same time. And a lot of our research recently has been showing that, addiction and pain are driven by deficits in like pleasure, hedonic processing. And so we've been doing a lot of stuff with like mindful savoring, sort of focusing on pleasure, focusing on object, focusing on a pleasant memory to try to accentuate and build that. Because I don't think of mindfulness as a vacuum, right? We're not trying to create this like just space of nothingness. I don't know, maybe we are, maybe that's ignorance. But to me, it feels like there's this sort of heart practice that Geshe was talking about. There's this sort of loving oneness and connection. And so can we use naturally attractive objects to sort of cultivate that in ourselves and hopefully then extend that into others in the world around us? So I think those are kind of the practices. I like kind of the movement and sort of the daily.
Wonderful. Yeah, no, I agree. Actually, a few months ago, we had in this dialogue Eric with Fadel and Dave, the trio, and talking about savoring. So yeah. But yeah, going back to the movement, I maybe I'll ask you a little more on that, because I know also Geshe and I are interested in that, and particularly the Tibetan yoga movements. But when you say move, are you thinking from the sports side, and how, being from Argentina, I also, soccer is big. And so I heard you say that you played soccer. So, but both in terms of sports, I know others play sport here. I know Wendy loves hiking, and I know Geshe likes golfing. So, sports it's part of many of our lives. But so when you say movement, can you say a little more on that?
Yeah. So I was always interested in jump shot meditation, right? And so can we recreate this sort of mental and physical experience by kind of bringing mindful awareness to the movement? I worked a little bit with the Appalachian State women's basketball team on this for a little while, and that was kind of fun. But I don't know, at least for a lot of folks that I work with, it feels like kind of quiet time alone is hard to find. And for busy moms, like maybe that walk around the block or walking the dog is the moment they can practice. And especially in the medical setting, right? I'm interested in the medical setting because most folks engage with it. And right, can this be the vehicle for exposing somebody to practice? And the medical folks don't just want to give me half an hour to kind of sit with somebody. But if I can find a way to kind of fold it into their care pathway, and often that's in a movement or coming into the clinic or leaving the clinic, then this, I guess, is sort of, it feels like a Trojan horse strategy, right? If I can figure out how to do this well in the movement world, then I can kind of fold this into the care pathway and get folks a dose of maybe some mental health while they're pursuing their physical health.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
I want to go to first to Geshe, and because I know that you started playing golf a few years back and you enjoy that. And then I want to come back to Wendy and close. I know we have only 6 minutes left, but Geshe, is that something that you want to say, maybe something about movement and meditation and your interest in golf, maybe, or other things?
Yes, sure. I would say movement is really, really important. Not just movement, but mindfully, and not too harsh. Some people are into harsh kind, and build muscles and things. Maybe it's good, but just again, mindfully and gently. Every movement is really good, particularly dancing. I always encourage people dancing, play. It's really, really important. It changes your brain chemistry, and everything changes your body. The block, the whatever inside you, depressed, everything changes. So golf, yes, I'm writing a book about golf right now with another pro, and 21 chapters. So this book pretty much finished, and what some of my Sangha members here read, saying, they're just saying that this golf book can be for every sport related, because it's also in the any sport is in the mind, very much a psychological game. Even, for example, golf is, yes, very much to do with that. how focused, how present moment, your movement, your hitting like that. That's why I love so much golf, like 2-3 times a week if I'm here golfing. So what I do is, as soon as the golf course are going, I'm another realm of mandala or enlightenment state. So I'm learning every movement, what I'm seeing, what I feeling, smell. It's not just hitting the ball, but it's the walking and movement. And also when you're turning, there's the 5 chakras, like Ali, we are yoga, like Salon. There's 5 energies we have, different main energies that they are blocked. Certain time we blocked. When they blocked, then it creates maybe anger, anxiety, all stress, all the different emotions. So that's why when the movement and breathing exercise together release that spontaneously. So golf, the same thing. When you're turning and hitting ball, it's movement. Earlier we talked about flexible. If some people's mind is very tight, their swing is very tight, and it's just not natural or smooth, So that's why they can't hit ball. And they hated golf. They hate it because they can't hit it, because they're pointing the ball and golf, not they're pointing for themselves. So that's why it's really important to learning how your mind flexible, how you use your mind to be mindful and learning. Every sport, I think, really, really good for mindfulness or just transforming yourself.
Thank you, Geshe.
Yeah.
Wendy, I know you wanted to add to this.
This my book name called Finding the Master on the course. So really, master is you, not the somebody else. We're thinking master is you, to be master yourself.
That's fantastic. I love that you're writing a book about golf. I'm totally going to check that out. That's great.
Yeah.
I wanted to clarify something from before when we were speaking about implicit bias, or just nuance a couple of things I said to make sure there wasn't any misunderstanding. But we're talking a lot about meditation, the capacity to maybe shift our own implicit biases and things like that, which I think there is a lot of capacity there. And I also just want to name, this is probably obvious, but of course, when we think about societal problems, structural racism and inequities and things like that, like there's very important work to be done, not, just sitting and meditating, right? So I just want to name that and suggest that all of these things need to be happening, right? We need to be working on structural levels and things like that. But at the same time, changing ourselves, we're all part of these systems, right? So we start to slowly also hopefully affect the system. And also, I've been thinking, as we've been talking about, being open to the present moment and changing our models and changing our habit patterns and things like that. I think there's also a role for discernment there, right? And I think that's an interesting space too. So like, it's not that we just always want to incorporate every new information that we find, especially in this world of misinformation that we exist in now. So I think it's interesting. I've been thinking more and more about like that discernment and, even just the practice, allowing for that space to then determine, is this information that you want to integrate or not, or things like that. So there's so much potential. I really have enjoyed this conversation.
Me too. And Geshe, I love that idea that when you are there, it's like entering a mandala, right? That space and you're part of it and you're influenced by it. But again, with discernment, as Wendy says. So I want to close by thanking all three of you. It's been wonderful. Thank you. Let me see if I can. Thank you, Milos. And I wanted to let people know that Thursday, September 8th, Rinpoche will be talking about realizing your full potential, ripening the conditions of the body. We're getting into the body again. So again, Geshe, Wendy, Adam, thank you so much. It's been fabulous and looking forward to continue interacting in different mandalas. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Cyber Sangha podcast. If you'd like to learn more about Cyber Sangha, visit us online at cybersangha.net.